We need the nearest hospital immediately!
Hurry!
The rain did not fall that night. It attacked Atlanta. Sheets of water slammed against windshields, flooded sidewalks, and turned the city streets into shining rivers of red brake lights and blurred reflections. Thunder rolled across the skyline, shaking glass towers and rattling nerves. Traffic crawled. Horns blared. Wipers fought a losing battle. Amina was running late. Her scrubs were damp at the hem. Her braided hair clung slightly to her neck. One hand gripped her purse. The other held Malachi close against her chest, wrapped in a thin blanket that was no match for the storm. His small body trembled, not from cold alone. He was struggling to breathe. Not loud, not dramatic, just that faint, frightening sound a mother knows too well. Each inhale came sharp. Each exhale carried a soft wheeze that tightened her chest more than the rain ever could. She pressed her palm against his back and quickened her pace toward the curb, where a black luxury sedan idled under the streetlight. She did not check the plate number. She did not look inside carefully. She saw the car door unlock, and she got in. The interior smelled of leather and power, not the faint scent of rideshare air freshener, not the casual clutter of a working driver's dashboard. This was quiet wealth, clean, controlled. The door shut. Amina froze. This was not the car she ordered. There was no rideshare decal on the windshield, no phone mounted to the dash, no music playing softly from a driver trying to earn 5 stars. Instead, a man sat in the back seat, watching her. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored with precision. His cufflinks caught the passing streetlights in brief flashes. His posture was calm, composed, unbothered by the chaos outside. He had been watching her long before this night. For months, actually. Not in a way that crossed lines, not in a way that disrespected her, but in a way that studied resilience. Every morning at 6:12 a.m., she waited at the same corner. Every evening she stepped off the bus with tired shoulders and steady eyes. No complaints, no audience, just responsibility carried quietly. He had noticed. And now she was sitting in his car. The driver turned slightly, confused. "Sir," but before anyone could clarify anything, Malachi's breathing changed. It worsened. His tiny fingers tightened in Amina's shirt. His chest worked harder. That wheeze deepened into something urgent, something that did not have time for embarrassment. Amina swallowed her pride. "Please," she said, voice steady but urgent. "My son needs a hospital." Her eyes did not look at the billionaire. They stayed on her child, protective, focused. For a fraction of a second, power and vulnerability shared the same air inside that vehicle. He could have asked her to step out. He could have corrected the mistake. He could have maintained distance. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and gave one clear command. Children's Memorial. Now. The driver accelerated. Rain hammered harder as the sedan cut through traffic with smooth authority. Hazard lights blinked. Other vehicles moved aside, instinctively making room for a car that carried both money and urgency. Amina did not thank him. She did not apologize again. She focused on counting Malachi's breaths. 1, 2, 3. Her thumb rubbed small circles on his back, steady and reassuring, even though her own heart pounded wildly. She whispered soft prayers into his ear. Promises. Strength disguised as calm. The man across from her watched closely. He had negotiated billion-dollar mergers. He had dismissed executives with a single sentence. He had commanded boardrooms filled with people twice his age. Yet this woman in damp scrubs held a different kind of authority. She did not ask for pity. She did not beg. She did not crumble in front of wealth. She carried everything silently. And tonight, the storm forced their worlds to collide. Let me ask you something. How many single mothers carry emergencies alone because pride is the only thing no one can repossess? How many women hold families together without applause? How many times has someone powerful walked past resilience without seeing it? He had seen her. And she had never known. What happens, the narrator asked slowly, when pride meets power? The car swerved around a stalled truck. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. The hospital sign appeared ahead, glowing through sheets of rain. Amina finally looked up. Their eyes met. His were calm but intent, not curious in a careless way, not entertained, observing, respecting. She straightened slightly. "I don't need charity," she said before he could speak. Her voice did not shake. It carried history. Long nights, double shifts, side comments from supervisors, glances from people who assumed she could not afford certain neighborhoods. The weight of race, the weight of class, the weight of being underestimated. He did not argue. He simply replied, evenly, "We'll talk inside." The sedan pulled under the emergency entrance canopy. Nurses rushed forward with the stretcher. Rainwater pooled beneath expensive tires. Power stepped out on one side. Pride stepped out on the other. And a little boy who could barely breathe lay between them. She did not know that this moment would reshape a billion-dollar empire. She did not know that the CEO of one of Atlanta's largest investment firms had been observing her strength for months. She only knew her son needed help. "Stay with me. Because before this night ends, a decision will be made that changes both their lives forever. If you believe respect should come before rescue, comment below, respect before rescue. Like this story, if you believe strength is not always loud, subscribe so you never miss a moment where dignity challenges power. This storm was only the beginning. The hospital doors slid open with urgent efficiency. Warm air rushed out to meet rain-soaked panic. Nurses transferred Malachi onto a small emergency bed. Oxygen masks secured, monitors attached. The steady beep of machines filled the space where thunder once dominated. Amina walked beside the stretcher without hesitation. She did not look back to see if the billionaire followed. In this building, titles meant nothing. Breath meant everything. "History of asthma?" a nurse asked while moving quickly. "Yes," Amina answered clearly, triggered by weather shifts. He had mild congestion earlier. It escalated fast. Her voice was calm in a way that only mothers understand. Fear existed, but function came first. They wheeled Malachi through double doors marked pediatric emergency. Amina stopped at the registration counter when instructed. Forms were pushed toward her. A tablet. Insurance card request. She reached into her purse. Her fingers paused. The receptionist typed rapidly. Brows tightened. "I'm sorry," the woman said carefully. "There's a hold on the insurance policy. It hasn't cleared this month." Amina blinked once. "That's not possible," she replied. "I paid it. It's showing as pending. Without confirmation, treatment authorization is limited." Behind the counter, another nurse slowed slightly. A glance passed between staff members. Policy, protocol, liability. Inside the treatment room, Malachi's oxygen levels dipped again. Amina's body stiffened. "Limited means what?" she asked. "It means we can stabilize," the receptionist said, tone professional. "But advanced respiratory intervention requires financial authorization." There it was, the invisible wall. Not built from brick, built from numbers. In that moment, race, class, and power stood silently in the hallway. A soaked black mother in scrubs. A billionaire CEO in a tailored suit. A system that moved faster for some than for others. He stepped forward. Not loudly, not dramatically. "Authorize whatever is needed," he said to the administrator approaching the desk. "Full coverage. Immediately." Amina turned sharply. "I don't need charity." The words were firm, not defensive. Firm. The hallway quieted. Doctors continued moving inside the room, but attention lingered here. The soaked woman. The powerful man. The child in between. He met her eyes evenly. "This isn't charity," he replied. "It's care." She held his gaze. Her pride was not arrogance. It was survival. She had built a life without handouts. Worked night shifts. Accepted extra hours. Swallowed insults from supervisors who assumed she would not speak up. She had learned that accepting help often came with strings. "I will pay it," she said. "Just give me the invoice." "And lose time?" he asked calmly. Her jaw tightened. Malachi coughed from inside the room. A dry, struggling sound that sliced through debate. Everyone has felt invisible at some point. Invisible at a workplace where your effort goes unnoticed. Invisible in a relationship where your sacrifices are expected but not acknowledged. invisible in rooms where your background speaks louder than your qualifications. Amina had lived that invisibility. Tonight, it stood across from power and refused to bow. What happens, the narrator asks slowly, when a woman who has survived, being underestimated, refuses rescue from a man used to being obeyed? The administrator returned. Sir, we'll need... Put it on my corporate account, he said without raising his voice. Expedite everything. The administrator nodded and moved quickly. Amina exhaled slowly. I will reimburse you, she said. He did not smile. I'm not investing in repayment, he answered. I'm investing in him. That statement shifted something. Not romantic, not soft, strategic. Because while she saw emergency, he saw something else too. He saw a mother who had never once asked for more than fairness. He saw strength that refused to collapse even when systems stalled her. Inside the treatment room, respiratory specialists arrived. Equipment changed, medication administered. Oxygen levels slowly began to climb. Amina finally stepped inside. She stood at Malachi's bedside, one hand resting gently on his leg. Her shoulders loosened slightly as the monitor stabilized. The billionaire remained near the doorway, watching, not intruding. For months he had observed her from a distance. The early bus stops, the grocery store evenings counting exact change, the way she tied Malachi's shoes with precision before school interviews, the way she spoke to him as if he were already destined for more. He had built an empire from recognizing overlooked value, and tonight confirmed what he already suspected. Strength does not always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears wet scrubs and refuses pity. She finally looked at him again. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said quietly. I did. A pause lingered between them. Not romantic, not fragile, just charged with mutual recognition. Power had stepped in. Pride had not surrendered. And a child's breath had been protected. Stay until the end of this story. Because the decision that follows this night will not just affect hospital bills. It will challenge corporate leadership, redefine influence, and test whether respect truly comes before rescue. If you have ever carried everything silently, this story is for you. Comment below, respect before rescue. Because what happens next will prove that sometimes the one underestimated is the one who saves everything. Malachi's breathing stabilized. The crisis passed, but the tension did not. Rain still battered the windows outside the pediatric unit. Atlanta's skyline flickered in the distance, blurred by water and city lights. Inside the hospital corridor, silence replaced urgency. Amina sat beside her son's bed, fingers intertwined with his small hand. Exhaustion rested on her shoulders, but she remained upright, alert, guarded. The billionaire CEO stood a few feet away, phone in hand. Not scrolling, not distracted, thinking, because the emergency inside that hospital was not the only one unfolding that night. Across town, inside a glass high-rise overlooking Midtown, his company's board of directors was still in session. A late-night vote, a merger worth billions, investors on edge, media waiting for a morning announcement. He had stepped out of that meeting earlier for what was supposed to be a 10-minute call. He had never returned, and the board was not pleased. His phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls from his chief financial officer. 2 urgent messages from legal counsel. 1 text from the board chair. We need you here, now. He did not move. Instead, he walked slowly toward the hallway outside Malachi's room and answered. Yes, he said calmly. A heated voice responded through the speaker. The investors are nervous. If you don't sign tonight, we risk losing the acquisition. The competitor is ready to outbid. He looked through the glass at Amina. She was speaking softly to her son, brushing his forehead with careful tenderness. Delay the vote, he said. A stunned pause. Delay? We've prepared for months. Delay it. Silence again. Then frustration. This deal secures the company's future. He replied evenly. Not if we're building it without integrity. There it was. The true collision. Because earlier that week, a proposal had landed on his desk. A cost-cutting measure buried inside financial projections. It recommended outsourcing a large percentage of the company's transportation division. Drivers, dispatchers, maintenance crews. People like the man who drove him tonight. People like the ones who kept the business moving, while executives collected bonuses. It was profitable. It was strategic. It was cold. He had been undecided, until the storm, until the wrong car door opened, until he saw who actually carried weight in silence. "Do you know who drove me tonight?" he asked the CFO quietly. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything." He ended the call. Back inside the room, Amina looked up. "You should go," she said. "Your world doesn't pause for strangers." He studied her carefully. "You're not a stranger." A small crease formed between her brows. She did not like assumptions. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied. She waited. "I know you work double shifts. I know you turn down rides when you can't justify the extra expense. I know you correct people politely when they mispronounce your name instead of staying silent. And I know you've never once asked anyone to carry your responsibility." Her posture changed, not softened, measured. "You've been watching me?" Yes, the word was honest. Why? Because this is where power dynamics shift. A wealthy CEO observing a black single mother can easily be misinterpreted. Control, curiosity, superiority, but his voice carried none of that. "Because strength like yours is rare," he said. "And my company has been preparing to eliminate people who show up every day in storms just like this one." Her eyes sharpened. Eliminate, outsource, replace, automate. Words that sound cleaner than they are. She stood slowly. "So what does that have to do with me?" "Everything." He stepped closer, but not too close. "The driver who brought us here tonight? He's part of that division. If I sign the merger as structured, he loses his job next quarter." Amina absorbed that quietly. "And you're hesitating because I watched a man move traffic aside in a storm without asking who was in the back seat. Because I watched you refuse charity even when systems stalled you. Because I built an empire by recognizing value others overlook." He held her gaze steadily. "And tonight reminded me what that value actually looks like. Everyone has felt underestimated. The janitor who knows more about a building than the executives upstairs. The assistant whose ideas are borrowed but never credited. The driver whose quiet reliability keeps wealth in motion. What happens," the narrator asks slowly, "when the person considered replaceable becomes the reason leadership changes?" Malachi stirred softly. Amina glanced back at her son, then at the man before her. "You're saying this storm changed a corporate decision?" "I'm saying," he replied, "that I was about to sign away thousands of livelihoods, to secure applause from people who will never carry what you carry." She folded her arms. "And now I'm reconsidering what success costs." A long silence followed. This was no fairy tale beginning, no sudden romance. This was tension built from respect and resistance. "You don't owe us anything," she said carefully. "No," he agreed. "But leadership isn't about what I owe. It's about what I protect." The rain outside softened slightly. Somewhere across Atlanta, board members waited impatiently for a signature. Inside this hospital room, a decision formed instead. Not about charity, not about attraction, about alignment. The billionaire CEO turned toward the hallway once more and made a second call. "Cancel the vote," he said. "We're restructuring the proposal. Transportation division stays intact. No layoffs." The protest on the other end was loud. He ended the call anyway. When he returned to the doorway, Amina was watching him differently now. Not impressed, not grateful, evaluating. "You just risked investor backlash," she said. "Yes. For people who don't even know your name." He glanced at Malachi. "They don't need to. Stay until the end of this story. Because the driver who cut through rain tonight did more than reach a hospital. He unknowingly saved $1 billion empire from losing its humanity. And the woman who refused charity forced a powerful man to examine the cost of his ambition." If you believe leadership should protect the overlooked, comment below. Respect before rescue. Because sometimes the one behind the wheel is steering more than a car. The rain slowed to a steady rhythm against the hospital windows. Inside the pediatric room, the crisis had passed, but something far greater had begun. Malachi slept peacefully now, oxygen levels stable, small chest rising and falling with restored ease. Machines hummed in quiet agreement, nurses moved with softer steps. The urgency that once filled the room had shifted into watchful calm. Amina remained seated beside her son, her back straight despite exhaustion. She had not cried. Not once. She had not collapsed into relief. She had handled fear the way she handled everything else in her life, internally. The billionaire CEO stood by the window, jacket draped over his arm, phone silent for the first time that night. Two different worlds. One hospital room. One storm that refused to be random. He broke the silence carefully. "I owe you an apology." Amina looked up slowly. "For what?" "For watching your strength from a distance instead of supporting it openly." She studied him. "You don't know me well enough to support me. I know enough to recognize integrity." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She was not used to compliments from men in power, especially not men who own buildings she could never afford to enter. "You helped my son," she said evenly. "That's enough." "No," he replied gently. "It isn't." The weight in his voice was different now. Not corporate. Not commanding. Intentional. "There are people in my company," he continued, "who believe profit is the only measure of success. Tonight reminded me that survival is also a measure. Dignity is a measure. Protection is a measure." Amina folded her hands in her lap. "You're talking about business. I'm talking about my child. And I'm saying they're connected." She held his gaze without flinching. "Explain." He stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "The driver who brought us here, Calvin. He's been with the company 12 years. Never late, never complained. Tonight he moved traffic like his life depended on it. If I had signed that merger, he would have been replaced by an algorithm." Amina's expression softened, but only slightly. "And now? Now he won't be." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it carried something else. Consideration. Power does not often pause for reflection, yet tonight it had. "You changed that because of what you saw here?" she asked. "I changed it because I saw what I was about to overlook." Her fingers brushed Malachi's curls gently. "You don't get credit for correcting a mistake before it happens." He nodded once. "I'm not asking for credit. Then what are you asking for?" The question lingered. He did not answer immediately, because this was no simple attraction, no dramatic confession, no sudden connection built on crisis. It was something more complex, respect meeting resistance. "I'm asking for a conversation," he said finally. "Not about charity, not about favors, about perspective." Amina leaned back slightly in her chair. "You want to interview me?" A faint smile touched his lips. "I want to understand what leadership looks like from where you stand." She almost laughed, but didn't. "You really think someone like me has something to teach someone like you?" His response was immediate. "Yes." Her silence this time was not defensive. It was thoughtful. Everyone has known what it feels like to be underestimated, to walk into rooms where assumptions enter before you do, to speak carefully so your intelligence is not questioned, to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Amina had mastered invisibility, not because she lacked presence, but because the world often chose not to see her. She had learned to speak clearly, but not too boldly, to correct disrespect without escalating it, to enter rooms prepared to be underestimated and leave having proven something without announcing it. So when this powerful man stood in a hospital room asking for her perspective, she did not melt. She evaluated. "You run a company worth billions," she said calmly. "You have consultants with degrees from places I can't pronounce. Why would my opinion matter?" He answered without hesitation. "Because consultants speak theory. You live consequence." That landed. Outside the room, footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor. A nurse adjusted a chart at the foot of Malachi's bed and exited quietly. The moment felt contained, private, focused. "You think you can rebuild your company because of one night?" Amina asked. "No," he replied. "I think I can realign it because I was reminded what it's supposed to protect." She watched him carefully. There was no arrogance in his posture now, no boardroom sharpness, just clarity. "You've built something powerful," she said slowly. "But power without proximity to real struggle becomes detached." He nodded. "And detached leadership makes decisions that look efficient on spreadsheets but destructive in real life." A brief silence followed. He understood, not because she flattered him, not because she softened her tone, but because she refused to shrink her truth. For months, he admitted, I've watched you carry more than most executives I know. You move with discipline. You prioritize without complaint. You endure without applause. That's leadership. She exhaled slowly. You don't know what I endure. You're right, he said, but I know strength when I see it. Malachi shifted in his sleep, breathing steady now. Amina brushed his forehead gently. Strength doesn't mean I don't struggle, she said quietly. It means I don't have the option to stop. That sentence settled heavily between them. He absorbed it. In boardrooms, pressure came with backup plans, legal teams, and safety nets. For her, pressure came with rent due dates, medical bills, and a child who depended entirely on her stability. Different scales. Same word, responsibility. Earlier tonight, he said carefully, I was prepared to approve a restructuring plan. It would have increased shareholder value immediately. Headlines would call it bold, strategic, visionary, and it would have cost people their jobs, she finished. Yes, people like Calvin, yes. She leaned back in her chair. Do you know why drivers stay loyal to companies like yours? He waited. Because stability is rare. When someone gives you steady work, you protect it. You show up in storms. You drive like your own child is in the back seat. His expression shifted subtly. That was it. That was the piece no analyst had presented. Loyalty rooted in necessity becomes dedication. Dedication becomes excellence. Excellence builds reputation. Reputation builds empire. And he had almost traded that for temporary applause. What happens, the narrator asks steadily, when a woman who has never sat at a corporate table explains leadership better than the people paid to define it? He stepped closer, not as a billionaire now, but as a man confronting truth. If I asked you to consult for my company, he said carefully, would you consider it? Amina almost smiled. You don't even know my background. I know you understand impact. That's not the same as understanding finance. Finance can be learned, he replied. Integrity cannot. Her eyes held his for a long moment. This was not romance. This was alignment forming slowly. You want optics? She asked. Or change? Change. You're prepared for pushback? Yes. Investors will question you. I expect it. Executives will resist. I'll handle it. She studied him one final time. If you're serious, she said calmly, then don't hire me because you feel grateful tonight. Don't elevate me to prove a point. Build policies that protect people before profit. That's leadership. His response was immediate. Help me design them. The storm outside softened further. The chaos that began this night had led to clarity neither of them expected. A child gasped for breath. A mother refused charity. A driver cut through traffic. A CEO reconsidered ambition. And somewhere between pride and power, a decision formed that would ripple far beyond this hospital room. Amina stood. I'll think about your offer, she said. He nodded. That's all I ask. As he turned to leave, his phone vibrated again. The board chair calling for the fourth time. He answered calmly. The merger is suspended, he said. We are restructuring with workforce protection as priority. Anger responded from the other end. He did not flinch. My decision stands. He ended the call. In that moment, something shifted permanently. Not because of attraction, not because of sympathy, but because leadership met lived reality and chose to listen. Amina watched him walk toward the elevator. For the first time that night, she allowed herself a quiet thought. Maybe power can learn. Maybe influence can change. And maybe the man who commanded traffic in a storm was not the only one steering something larger. Stay with this story, because what began as a mistaken car door will challenge boardrooms, test pride, and reveal whether respect truly comes before rescue. If you believe dignity should never depend on wealth, comment below, respect before rescue, and subscribe, because the next chapter will show how a driver, a mother, and a decision in the rain reshaped an empire. The elevator doors closed. For a brief moment he stood alone inside mirrored walls reflecting a man who had built success from precision, timing, and calculated risk. Tonight, the risk was different. It was not financial. It was philosophical. He loosened his tie slightly, exhaled once, and looked at his reflection. For years, He had believed leadership meant staying 10 steps ahead of competitors. Tonight, leadership meant stepping closer to reality. The elevator descended. Above him, in a pediatric hospital room, a mother who refused charity adjusted a blanket around her son. She did not know she had just influenced a billion-dollar decision. She had not pitched an idea. She had not requested a meeting. She had simply stood firm. Power often expects gratitude when it intervenes. Pride often rejects help to survive. But when both choose respect instead of control, something transformative happens. The elevator doors opened into the hospital lobby. The storm had softened into steady rain. Security staff nodded as he passed. Outside, the black sedan waited. Calvin stepped out from behind the wheel. "You good, sir?" he asked respectfully. The CEO looked at him differently now. "Yes," he replied. "And you?" Calvin nodded. "Glad the little boy's stable." There was no expectation in his tone. No curiosity about corporate tension, just genuine concern. "Calvin," he said, pausing, "how long have you worked for us?" 12 years next month. Ever think about leaving?" Calvin smiled faintly. "Stability's hard to find these days. I take care of my family. Company takes care of me. That's enough. Simple. Clear. Loyalty rooted in responsibility." He placed a hand briefly on Calvin's shoulder. "Drive me back to the office." They entered the car. As Atlanta's streets glistened under rain and streetlights, he stared out the window, mind sharp and steady. Across town, inside the boardroom, impatience was building. Investors refreshed email threads. Executives rehearsed arguments. Advisors calculated losses if the merger collapsed. They expected numbers. They were about to receive conviction. The sedan pulled into the underground parking of the high-rise headquarters. Glass towers reflected wet pavement like polished steel. The building hummed with late-night tension. Before stepping out, he looked at Calvin again. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what, sir?" "For reminding me who keeps this company moving." Calvin nodded, slightly confused but appreciative. Inside the elevator to the executive floor, he sent a single message to the entire board: emergency session. Effective immediately. Workforce protections non-negotiable. When the doors opened, 20 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Some irritated, some anxious, some calculating. He walked to the head of the table without rushing. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began evenly. "Tonight's merger vote is suspended." Immediate objections erupted. "We lose leverage. Competitors will capitalize. Share prices will react." He raised a hand once. The room quieted. "If our growth requires eliminating the very people who built our reliability, then our growth is flawed." A senior board member leaned forward. "This is emotional decision-making." "No," he replied calmly. "It is strategic longevity." He moved toward the presentation screen and replaced the merger slide with a new proposal outline. Transportation division remains intact. We implement profit-sharing incentives. We increase driver retention bonuses. We establish an internal leadership advisory council composed of non-executive staff. Confusion rippled across the table. "Why would we give operational employees advisory influence?" someone asked sharply. "Because," he said steadily, "those closest to daily execution understand consequences faster than analysts do." Silence. What triggered this? The board chair demanded. He did not hesitate. Reality. The room stiffened. "Earlier tonight," he continued, "a driver cut through a storm to save a child's life. He did it without knowing who sat in the back seat. That is the kind of loyalty you protect, not replace." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. "This isn't charity," he added. "It's care for the foundation of our company." The phrase lingered. Care. Not weakness. Not softness. Care as strategy. "Shareholders will question this," someone warned. "Let them," he replied. "If they invest in us, they invest in our values." Silence again. Power had spoken, but differently. Not from dominance, from alignment. Back at the hospital, Amina sat quietly watching Malachi sleep. She did not know boardrooms were adjusting because she refused to bow. She only knew her son was breathing easier. And for her, that was enough. But this story is not about coincidence. It is about collision. A mistaken car door. A halted treatment. A prideful refusal. A decisive command. And one question: what happens when the person society overlooks becomes the catalyst for corporate transformation? Stay with this journey, because this was only the beginning. The woman who refused charity is about to challenge systems far beyond a hospital hallway. The driver who cut through rain has unknowingly secured more than his own job. And the billionaire who commanded boardrooms has just discovered that leadership without humility is incomplete. If you believe respect should come before rescue, comment below. Respect before rescue. Like this story if you've ever felt underestimated. Subscribe, because the next chapter reveals how one conversation will test whether power truly keeps its promises. Before boardrooms, before hospital corridors, before billion-dollar decisions paused because of one storm. There was Southwest Atlanta. Zariah did not grow up around glass towers or private elevators. She grew up on streets where front porches carried stories louder than any social media post. Brick duplexes lined blocks where children played tag until streetlights flickered on. Neighbors knew each other's middle names. Problems were not outsourced. They were discussed over folding chairs and paper plates. She learned early that survival was communal. Her mother worked long shifts at a nursing home, but she never allowed fatigue to silence her presence. Every Saturday morning, gospel music floated through their small living room, while breakfast sizzled on the stove. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, sometimes turkey sausage when money allowed. Her mother's voice would rise above the music. "Zariah, come taste this." She would shuffle in with school books still under her arm. "You don't rush flavor," her mother would say. "You give it time." Lessons were rarely delivered as lectures. They were folded into routine. Softness was not weakness. Pride was not arrogance. Faith was not decoration. Her block had rhythm. On Sundays, women in pressed dresses walked confidently toward church, heels clicking against pavement like percussion. Men leaned against parked cars, discussing football and rising rent prices. Children balanced between discipline and laughter. Zariah watched everything. She noticed which families quietly struggled, which fathers disappeared, which mothers carried both roles without complaint. She noticed how quickly respect shifted when money entered a room. By 16, she understood power even if she had never held it. Her mother once sat her down after school, folding laundry carefully. "Soft doesn't mean weak," she said firmly. "The world will try to make you hard. Don't let it. Strength is knowing who you are without shouting it." That sentence rooted itself inside Zariah permanently. Years later, when a billionaire would stand across from her in a hospital hallway, that foundation would hold. But back then, she was simply a girl from Southwest Atlanta, learning how to move with dignity, in a world that often mistook quiet for smallness. Sunday mornings shaped her discipline. The church was modest, but alive. Wooden pews polished by generations. A choir that sang like rent depended on it. A pastor who preached about resilience as if it were oxygen. Zariah did not attend for performance. She attended because community lived there. After service, cookouts unfolded in nearby yards. Smoke rose from grills. Cousins argued over card games. Aunties compared recipes and marriages. Laughter mixed with debates about politics and property taxes. Her Aunt Denise had the loudest voice at every gathering. "Baby," she would tell Zariah while flipping chicken on the grill, "don't ever shrink to make somebody else comfortable." "I'm not shrinking," teenage Zariah would reply defensively. "You better not be." Community meant accountability. If she came home late, 3 different neighbors already knew. If she succeeded in school, 5 families celebrated like she belonged to all of them. Even hardship had witnesses. When her mother struggled with rent one winter, no announcement was made. Groceries simply appeared. Someone paid the light bill quietly. Pride was respected, but no one let her fall alone. That rhythm shaped how Zariah later refused charity, but accepted solidarity. There is a difference. Charity places one above another. Solidarity stands beside. That distinction would matter deeply on the night of the storm. Malachi was diagnosed at 3. Asthma triggered by weather shifts and seasonal allergens. Most days manageable. Some nights unpredictable. Zariah memorized the sound of his breathing the way musicians memorize chords. She could tell within seconds whether he was fine or whether intervention was necessary. Inhaler always in her purse. Spacer cleaned weekly. Emergency plan taped inside her kitchen cabinet. She did not dramatize it. She prepared. "Mommy, I'm okay, Malachi would insist whenever she hovered too long. I know you are, she would reply, adjusting his jacket. And we're keeping it that way. Doctors explained that stress could worsen episodes, so she guarded her emotions carefully around him. Bills were discussed after bedtime. Worry was processed privately. The hospital wristbands from past visits stayed in a small drawer in her bedroom. She never threw them away. Each one marked a night survived. Each plastic band carried a memory of holding her child while machines steadied his lungs. Those wristbands were not symbols of fragility. They were proof of endurance. Insurance coverage fluctuated depending on payroll timing. That month, a billing error delayed processing. Zariah had paid her portion. She kept receipts organized inside a folder labeled simply proof. Still, systems do not move with the urgency of mothers. Statements arrived with unfamiliar codes and confusing balances. She would sit at her small kitchen table after Malachi slept, calculator beside her phone. Rent, utilities, medication, transportation. Numbers had weight. One miscalculation could tilt everything. She practiced what she called grocery math. Standing in supermarket aisles, she mentally tracked totals before reaching the register. She compared ounces, calculated cost per serving, adjusted menus in real time. Malachi once reached for name-brand cereal. "Can we get this one?" She smiled gently. "We're trying the other one today." He accepted it without complaint. Children sense tension, even when it is not spoken aloud. That was why pride mattered, not ego. Stability. When the hospital receptionist mentioned an insurance hold during the storm, it was not embarrassment she felt. It was frustration at a system that delays care while mothers count coins. Zariah worked front desk at a luxury hotel in Buckhead. Marble floors, crystal lighting, polished smiles. Her uniform was tailored and pressed daily. Hair braided neatly, makeup subtle, posture straight. "Good evening, welcome to the Crescent Royale," she would say warmly, voice controlled and confident. Guests rarely imagined the bus ride she took to get there. They did not see her reviewing pediatric invoices on her phone during break. They saw professionalism. She handled difficult guests with calm efficiency. One evening, a businessman complained loudly about a room upgrade delay. "Do you know how much I pay to stay here?" "Yes, sir," she replied evenly. "And we value your loyalty. Allow me a moment to resolve this." Soft did not mean weak. Her supervisor once pulled her aside. "You don't react," he said. "That's rare." "I respond," she corrected politely. Control was her armor. She observed wealthy couples argue in the lobby. Executives negotiate mergers over cocktails. Families celebrate milestones in banquet halls. Power moved differently there. But she noticed something else. Wealth did not eliminate insecurity. It simply concealed it better. After 10-hour shifts, she rode the bus home. The bus stop near her apartment had a flickering overhead light. She often stood beneath it, reviewing text messages from Malachi's teacher while checking the transit app. Rain or heat, she remained composed. Neighbors would greet her. "Evening, Zariah." "Evening." No complaints. Inside her apartment, once the door closed, the weight settled. Shoes off. Uniform hung carefully. Heels placed neatly by the door. Malachi would run to her. "Mommy." Energy returned instantly. She cooked dinner, reviewed homework, checked his breathing before bed. Only after he slept did she allow herself to sit quietly. Sometimes she stared at nothing for several minutes. Not sadness, not defeat, just depletion. Professionalism demands emotional regulation. Motherhood demands emotional presence. Balancing both required discipline few people saw. The morning after the hospital visit, Aunt Denise called. "I heard about the storm," she said immediately. "You all right?" "We're fine," Zariah replied. "Malachi's stable." "Stable doesn't mean stress-free." Zariah smiled faintly. "You always go straight to the point. That's my job. Now tell me about this man." She hesitated. "He helped." "Helped how?" "Covered treatment. Stopped some corporate decision that would have cost people jobs." Aunt Denise whistled softly. "So he's powerful." "Yes." "And you trust him?" "I don't know him." "Good," her aunt said firmly. "Trust is earned slowly. Respect is observed consistently. Zariah nodded, even though she could not be seen. Remember what your mama used to say, Antonice continued. Soft doesn't mean weak. I remember. Then don't let anybody confuse your gratitude with obligation. I won't. Community still guarded her. That evening, Mrs. Thompson from next door knocked gently. Baby, I made soup. Malachi eatin' all right? He is, Zariah replied warmly. Mrs. Thompson peered inside. You look tired. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine all the time. Zariah exhaled softly. I know. The older woman placed a hand over hers. We raised you girls strong, but strength includes rest. Zariah nodded. Support did not diminish independence. It reinforced it. After everyone slept, Zariah stood in her small living room. City noise hummed faintly outside. She did not kneel dramatically. She did not cry loudly. She spoke quietly. God, give me wisdom, not opportunity without clarity, not favor without discernment. Protect my son. Guide my decisions. A brief pause. And if this man means well, show it in consistency. She opened her eyes. Peace did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like steadiness. On her dresser lay 2 hospital wristbands. On her kitchen table sat a folded grocery receipt with handwritten calculations in the margins. At the bus stop the next morning she stood upright, uniform crisp, mind alert. Across the city, a billionaire prepared to face investors because of a decision shaped partly by her firmness. She did not know how deeply her world was about to intersect with his again, but one thing remained certain. Zariah from Southwest Atlanta did not bend easily. And power had just encountered a woman raised to understand that softness is strength, dignity is non-negotiable, and leadership begins at home. Long before Atlanta boardrooms carried his name, Cameron Whitmore learned how to sit still in rooms that expected perfection. Boston shaped him differently than Southwest Atlanta shaped Zariah. His childhood unfolded behind wrought iron gates and brick estates, trimmed with ivy that climbed like ambition. The Whitmore family name carried weight in financial circles long before Cameron understood what leverage meant. His grandfather had built a regional investment firm. His father expanded it into national influence. By the time Cameron was born, legacy was no longer optional. It was assumed. Family dinners were not casual. They were structured. Napkins folded precisely. Conversation directed toward economics, global markets, and philanthropic appearances that strengthened reputation. Emotions were not unwelcome. They were simply irrelevant. At 8 years old, Cameron once asked his father why he never attended school recitals. His father replied calmly, without looking up from financial documents, "Performance is admirable, production is essential." Cameron learned the distinction immediately. Performance earns applause. Production earns control. Winters in Boston were cold enough to discipline posture. Cameron attended private academies where competition was silent but constant. Classmates measured worth through internships secured by summer, test scores whispered discreetly, and family portfolios discussed as if they were hobbies. He adapted quickly. While other children sought validation from peers, Cameron sought precision. He studied how his father entered rooms and how board members paused when he spoke. He noticed that authority did not raise its voice. It reduced variables. By 14, Cameron could read market reports fluently. By 16, he interned inside his father's firm, sitting quietly at the edge of conference tables absorbing negotiation strategies like oxygen. He rarely rebelled, not because he lacked curiosity, because discipline felt safer than uncertainty. Boston did not teach him how to express vulnerability. It taught him how to eliminate weakness. And in that environment, emotional restraint became survival. Whitmore men did not display overwhelm. They contained it. When Cameron's mother passed away during his sophomore year of high school, condolences flooded their home. Flowers lined marble countertops. Associates arrived with firm handshakes and measured sympathy. Cameron stood beside his father in a black suit, tailored for adulthood he had not yet emotionally reached. After the service, when guests departed, Cameron finally allowed his composure to fracture slightly. "She would have wanted you to stay strong," his father said evenly. "I am strong," Cameron replied quietly. "Then prove it." Grief, in that household, was processed through productivity. The following week, Cameron returned to school early and volunteered for additional academic competitions. He channeled emotion into measurable success. His father approved. "You lead by staying composed," his father told him one evening in his office lined with leather-bound portfolios. "Emotion clouds judgment. Achievement clarifies it." Cameron absorbed the lesson fully. By college, he no longer struggled to compartmentalize. He mastered it. Personal disappointment stayed separate from professional ambition. Attraction stayed separate from strategy. Loss stayed separate from negotiation. This training built resilience. It also built distance. He learned to analyze feelings rather than feel them. When investors argued, he remained calm. When competitors attacked publicly, he responded strategically. When relationships ended because partners described him as distant, he accepted the critique without protest. Control felt safer than exposure. And over time, he stopped questioning whether that control cost him something invisible. Cameron attended Harvard Business School as if it were expected, not achieved. Lecture halls became rehearsal spaces for leadership. Case studies were dissected with surgical precision. Professors praised his ability to assess risk without emotional bias. Classmates admired his clarity. One peer once joked during a group project, "Whitmore doesn't blink." Cameron smiled politely. He did blink, just nodded uncertainty. By graduation, he had already secured institutional investors eager to partner with his expansion into Atlanta. The Southeast market presented growth potential his father's generation had overlooked. He relocated with a vision. Atlanta was dynamic, ambitious, less rigid than Boston but equally strategic. He built Whitmore Capital's Southeast division into a powerhouse within 5 years. Real estate portfolios expanded. Transportation assets strengthened. Corporate mergers became headlines. Boardrooms felt natural to him. Long polished tables, projected revenue charts, controlled debate. He did not dominate discussions aggressively. He guided them quietly. When tension escalated, he would lean back slightly and say, "Let's revisit fundamentals." Silence followed. He understood leverage better than most, and success accumulated. Yet with each achievement, something subtle echoed. Applause faded quickly. Victory felt procedural. He told himself that satisfaction would arrive after the next milestone. It rarely did. Cameron's personality was defined by moderation. He did not drink excessively at networking events. He did not gossip. He did not lose his temper publicly. Employees described him as fair but distant. He implemented performance incentives tied to measurable productivity. He rewarded loyalty. He expected discipline. Calvin, the driver who cut through the storm, had remained employed 12 years partly because Cameron valued consistency. Yet Cameron rarely visited the transportation division personally. He trusted metrics more than proximity. When executives debated cost reductions, he listened carefully. He weighed ethical implications intellectually. But until the hospital night, he had not felt the human consequence of corporate restructuring. He believed in efficiency. He believed in growth. He believed leadership required detachment. The storm began shifting that belief. Because detachment feels logical until a child struggles to breathe in the back seat of a company car. Cameron's Atlanta penthouse overlooked the city skyline from the 48th floor. Glass walls framed highways glowing with motion below. Art curated by consultants decorated pristine surfaces. The refrigerator rarely held more than bottled water, and prepared meals delivered discreetly. After the emergency board meeting where he suspended the merger, Cameron returned home near midnight. He removed his jacket, placed it neatly on a chair, and walked toward the window. The city pulsed beneath him. Inside, silence dominated. No television murmured in the background. No child's laughter echoed. No partner waited with questions about his day. His phone buzzed occasionally, with investor messages expressing concern. He responded concisely. He stood alone. Success surrounded him in square footage and valuation. Loneliness filled the spaces between. He had convinced himself that ambition required isolation. But the hospital hallway introduced doubt. Zariah's steady refusal to accept charity had unsettled him. Not because she rejected help, because she demanded respect. He replayed her words. Build policies that protect people before profit. No consultant had framed it so plainly. In the penthouse, with Atlanta lights reflecting across glass, Cameron recognized something unfamiliar. He was powerful, yet, emotionally, he lacked fluency. He could analyze mergers, but struggled to interpret vulnerability. He could negotiate millions, but hesitated to articulate personal intention. He realized that Zoraya did not just challenge his corporate model. She exposed his emotional limitations. The morning after suspending the merger, Cameron faced major stakeholders via video conference. Tension lingered beneath professional greetings. "Cameron," one investor began, "the market reacts quickly. Delays signal instability." Cameron responded evenly. "Stability without integrity collapses long-term." Another investor leaned forward. "Are we shifting toward emotional governance?" "No," Cameron said calmly. "We are strengthening operational loyalty." He presented revised projections demonstrating that retaining experienced transportation staff would reduce turnover costs and enhance brand reliability. Data supported his decision, yet beneath the numbers lay something new: conviction influenced by lived reality rather than pure analytics. After the call ended, his chief operations officer approached privately. "You've changed tone," she observed. "Have the first. You're prioritizing people differently." He considered that. "Leadership evolves," he replied. But internally, he knew evolution had been triggered by confrontation with someone who refused to be diminished. Later that week, Cameron visited Boston for a scheduled foundation gala. After formalities concluded, he joined his father in a private study. "You suspended a major merger," his father said without greeting. "Yes. Why?" "Workforce implications required reconsideration." His father leaned back. "Sentimentality weakens negotiation." "This wasn't sentimentality," Cameron replied steadily. "It was recalibration." His father studied him carefully. "You built this division through precision. Don't let distraction undo it." "Is protecting employees distraction?" Cameron asked. "Achievement must remain primary," his father answered. "Emotion is secondary." The old lesson resurfaced: production over performance, achievement over feeling. Cameron met his father's gaze calmly. "Strength includes awareness," he said. His father did not respond immediately. The conversation ended without resolution. But something had shifted. Cameron no longer accepted emotional suppression as the only definition of discipline. On his return flight to Atlanta, Cameron sat by the window, city lights shrinking beneath clouds. He reviewed quarterly projections on his tablet. Numbers aligned. Strategy remained sound. Yet his mind returned repeatedly to the hospital corridor, to Zoraya's unwavering tone, to Malachi's fragile breathing, to Calvin's simple loyalty. He recognized a truth he had avoided for years. He was exceptional at building systems. He was inexperienced at building intimacy. Power had insulated him from emotional complexity. Zoraya, raised in community rhythm and disciplined resilience, possessed emotional intelligence he lacked. He was powerful, yet underdeveloped in the one area money could not accelerate: connection. He did not yet know what role she would play in his life. Consultant, challenger, something deeper. But he understood this clearly. The storm did more than alter a merger. It disrupted his internal architecture. For the first time, Cameron Whitmore questioned whether achievement alone defined fulfillment. Atlanta awaited him. Boardrooms awaited him. And somewhere in southwest Atlanta, a woman who calculated groceries precisely and guarded her son fiercely was preparing for another workday. Their worlds remained separate for now. But the intersection had begun, and Cameron was no longer certain that control alone would guide him forward. Months before the storm, months before Malachi's hospital wristband tightened around his small arm, months before Cameron Whitmore suspended a merger inside a tense boardroom. It began quietly. Whitmore Capital had recently expanded investment holdings into Atlanta's hospitality sector. One of their silent partners held significant equity in the Crescent Royale, the luxury hotel where Zoraya worked the front desk. Cameron scheduled an unannounced evaluation visit, not as a spectacle, not as an executive parade. He arrived understated, navy suit, no entourage, no introduction to staff. He preferred to observe operations without influence-altering behavior. The lobby carried its usual polished calm. Marble floors reflected chandelier light. Guests moved confidently, accustomed to comfort. Zoraya stood behind the front desk, posture composed, uniform crisp. "Good afternoon," she greeted him warmly. "Welcome to the Crescent Royale. How may I assist you today?" Her tone was measured, not overly cheerful, not mechanical. Professional. Cameron noted small details immediately. She maintained eye contact without challenge. She listened fully before responding. She navigated the system interface quickly, without appearing rushed. "I have a reservation under Whitmore," he said evenly. She did not react to the name. No widened eyes. No sudden deference. Just efficiency. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore. We have you in a City View suite for 3 nights. Would you prefer a late checkout on departure?" He paused. Few front desk associates proactively offered flexibility without prompting. "Yes," he replied. "Consider it arranged." When a guest behind him approached impatiently, raising his voice about delayed valet service, Zariah did not flinch. "Sir," she addressed the irritated man calmly, "we appreciate your patience. I will personally ensure your vehicle is retrieved within the next 5 minutes." Her delivery carried authority without confrontation. Cameron stepped aside, watching. This was not performance. It was composure rooted in discipline. He checked into his suite and made mental notes for the investment report. Service rating, exceptional. Operational flow, efficient. Front desk leadership presence, notable. At that time, he did not know her name, but he remembered her face. On his second evening at the hotel, Cameron lingered in the lobby intentionally. Not because he required assistance, because he wanted to observe staff interaction during peak hours. An elderly woman approached the desk slowly, leaning on a cane. "I'm not sure how to work the thermostat," she said, voice trembling slightly. "The room feels colder than I expected." Zariah stepped from behind the desk immediately. "No problem at all, ma'am. I'll walk up with you." A manager nearby offered to send maintenance instead. Zariah shook her head gently. "I've got it." Cameron watched from a seating area near the entrance. 10 minutes later, Zariah returned to the lobby, escorting the woman carefully. "Would you like some tea sent up as well?" Zariah asked softly. The woman smiled gratefully. "You remind me of my granddaughter." Zariah's smile in response was genuine. "Then you're in good hands." There was no audience applause, no supervisor recording metrics, just care offered without calculation. Cameron noted something unfamiliar stirring beneath observation. It was not attraction, not yet. It was recognition. She extended patience even when no tangible benefit followed. He requested a brief meeting with the hotel's general manager the next morning. "Your front desk associate," Cameron said evenly, "the one who assisted Mrs. Hargrove last night. What is her name?" "Zariah Bennett," the manager replied. "Consistently reliable." Cameron nodded once. Reliable. A word he valued deeply. Weeks later, Cameron exited a private strategy dinner near Midtown. Rain threatened, but had not yet fallen. Traffic congestion redirected his usual route home, forcing the sedan to pass through a bus corridor near Southwest Atlanta. That was when he saw her again. Zariah stood beneath a flickering streetlight at a bus stop, holding Malachi's hand. She wore a modest coat over her hotel uniform. He recognized the braids pulled neatly back, recognized the stillness in her posture. Malachi tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mommy, when we get home, can we finish the puzzle?" "Yes," she replied softly, "but you need to use your inhaler first." Cameron watched from inside the car, unnoticed. No luxury vehicle waited for her. No driver shielded her from weather shifts. Just a mother balancing fatigue and attention. The bus arrived late. She boarded calmly, guiding Malachi carefully up the steps. Cameron felt something shift internally. He had evaluated her professionally. Now he witnessed her personally. 2 separate worlds carried by the same woman. Observation became pattern, not stalking, not intrusion, awareness. When Cameron scheduled additional hotel inspections, he timed them during her shifts intentionally. He never announced his purpose. He simply observed. He noticed how she adjusted her tone depending on the guest, how she shielded junior staff from harsh complaints, how she never used exhaustion as an excuse for shortness. He asked the general manager neutral operational questions that often circled back to employee retention. "Why do associates stay long-term?" he inquired casually. "Leadership culture," the manager responded. "Some employees bring stability. Zariah is one of them." Stability, That word followed him. Admiration grew quietly, not fueled by fantasy, fueled by consistency. He began questioning something deeper. If someone carries that level of resilience daily, what experiences shaped it? And why had he never considered the emotional architecture behind professionalism before? Cameron's interest shifted towards structural impact. He requested internal reports on benefits packages for hospitality staff across partnered properties. On paper, coverage appeared adequate, but he knew systems often look clean until examined closely. During a closed meeting with his operations analyst, he asked directly, "How often are claims delayed?" The analyst hesitated. "Occasionally during payroll transitions." "Temporary holds." "Temporary can still cause harm," Cameron replied. He requested audit data. He reviewed transportation division benefits as well. He did not mention Zaraya's name. He did not disclose personal motivation, but seeds were planted. If loyalty drives profit, benefits protect loyalty. This inquiry occurred weeks before the hospital storm, before he knew Malachi's condition, before insurance delays collided with urgency. He had already begun studying whether policies aligned with values, not because of entitlement, because observation revealed gaps. Respect forms slowly when it is built on evidence. Cameron found himself recalling small details about Zaraya during unrelated meetings: her composure under pressure, her kindness without spectacle, her refusal to perform for validation. He admired how she moved through spaces that did not necessarily prioritize her. One afternoon, as he prepared quarterly expansion notes, he paused unexpectedly. He imagined her calculating groceries mentally in a supermarket aisle. The thought unsettled him. He had never needed to calculate essentials. He made purchases without reviewing totals. Contrast sharpened awareness. Respect deepened. He did not approach her. He did not introduce himself beyond hotel protocol. He waited, not out of superiority, out of caution, because something about her resilience demanded careful handling. The night of the storm was not coincidence, layered onto curiosity. It was culmination. Cameron had been watching her for months, not to possess, not to intrude, not to claim. He was studying how strength functions when no one applauds it, studying how leadership exists outside boardrooms, studying resilience he never learned in Boston. When she entered the wrong sedan that night, fate accelerated what observation had already begun. When she refused charity inside the hospital hallway, it confirmed everything he had sensed. She did not need rescue. She demanded respect. That distinction changed him. He realized something essential. He had built empires analyzing markets, but he had never analyzed quiet courage. He had evaluated portfolios, but never emotional endurance. And in studying her resilience, he began confronting his own deficiency. Power without empathy is incomplete. Control without connection is hollow. Zaraya did not know she had been observed. She only knew she lived deliberately. Yet Cameron understood now that what drew him was not status difference. It was contrast. She possessed emotional fluency he lacked. He possessed structural influence she had never accessed. Two incomplete strengths, standing parallel, soon to intersect intentionally. If you have ever carried responsibility without announcing it, if you have ever handled pressure without applause, if you have ever stayed composed while everything demanded reaction, comment below. Because what Cameron saw was not vulnerability to exploit, it was resilience to respect. And that realization is about to change everything. The storm had thinned to a quiet drizzle by the time the respiratory specialist stepped out of the pediatric room. Cameron was standing near the wall across from the nurse's station. Zaraya remained inside beside Malachi's bed, one hand resting gently over his small chest, counting each rise and fall as if oxygen required supervision. The doctor approached calmly. "He's responding well to the treatment," she said. "Oxygen saturation is stable. We'll monitor him overnight, but the immediate danger has passed." Zaraya exhaled slowly. Not dramatically, not collapsing in relief, just a controlled release of pressure she had been holding for hours. "Thank you," she replied evenly. When the doctor left, Zaraya leaned forward and brushed Malachi's curls away from his forehead. "You scared me tonight," she whispered softly. Malachi's eyes fluttered open slightly. "I'm okay, Mommy." "I know," she answered. And we're keeping it that way. Cameron watched from the doorway, careful not to intrude. He had negotiated acquisitions worth more than most hospital wings cost to build. Yet none of those victories carried the weight of hearing a child say, "I'm okay." For the first time in years, achievement felt secondary. Life felt primary. Zariah finally stepped into the hallway. "He's stable," she said. Cameron nodded. "I'm glad." Silence followed. It was not awkward. It was reflective. The crisis had passed. Now came conversation. They moved to the waiting room while nurses adjusted equipment inside Malachi's room. The space was quiet, lit softly, with vending machines humming faintly against the wall. Two other families sat several seats away, speaking in hushed tones. Zariah folded her hands in her lap. Cameron sat across from her, posture composed but less formal than earlier that night. "Thank you for acting quickly," she said finally. "You didn't hesitate," he replied. "You were clear. I've had practice." He studied her expression carefully. "How often?" "Enough." She did not elaborate. He respected that boundary. "You always carry his inhaler?" he asked. "Yes." "And backup medication?" "Yes." "And insurance confirmations?" he added carefully. She met his eyes. "Usually." There was no accusation in her tone, only realism. The receptionist's earlier statement still lingered between them. Insurance hold, authorization pending, treatment delayed by policy. Cameron felt the structural flaw more sharply now. "In my world," he said slowly, "problems are solved through escalation." "In mine," she replied, "problems are managed through preparation." That distinction hung in the air. Escalation requires influence. Preparation requires resilience. Neither dismissed the other, but they revealed difference. A nurse walked past with paperwork. Zariah glanced toward the pediatric wing instinctively. "You don't have to stay," she said quietly. "I know. But you have a company waiting. I've informed them." "You keep choosing delay," she observed. "I keep choosing priority." She tilted her head slightly. "And tonight, we're your priority?" He paused before answering. "Tonight, he is." She absorbed that, not as flattery, as assessment. After several minutes, Zariah spoke again. "I need clarity," she said evenly. "About what?" "Intent." He did not pretend to misunderstand. "You helped. I appreciate that. But I cannot become someone who depends on you." "You aren't," he replied calmly. "Not yet," she corrected. "But dependency can begin subtly." He leaned back slightly. "Explain." She chose her words carefully. "When systems fail me, I adjust. When bills rise, I reorganize. When emergencies happen, I prepare. If I start expecting rescue, I lose discipline." He considered that seriously. "I'm not interested in rescue," he said. "I'm interested in equity." That's easy to say when you control capital. It's harder to implement. "Then implement it," she replied without raising her voice. "No anger, no dramatics, just challenge." "I won't be your project," she continued. "I won't be a story you tell at investor meetings about compassion." "You're not," he said firmly. "Then what am I?" The question settled deeply. He answered carefully. "You are someone whose strength exposed blind spots in my leadership." She studied him. "That sounds analytical." "It is," he admitted. "And personal," he added after a moment. She did not soften immediately. "I don't need mentorship," she said. "I'm not offering mentorship. I don't need sponsorship. I'm not offering sponsorship." "Then what?" He held her gaze steadily. "Conversation." She waited. "You understand impact differently than most executives I know. I want to learn that perspective." She crossed her arms loosely. "And what do I gain?" "Influence over policies that affect people like you." She was quiet. "That sounds strategic," she said. "It is." "And emotional?" she pressed. He hesitated. "Yes." Honesty felt unfamiliar on his tongue. "But necessary." The waiting room clock ticked softly. For the first time since she met him, Cameron's voice lost executive polish. "I don't know how to navigate this," he admitted. She blinked. "Navigate what?" "Connection without control." That sentence carried vulnerability without theatrics. She watched him carefully. "In my world," he continued, Relationships are transactional. Networks are built on mutual gain. Even philanthropy has strategy. And you don't want this to be strategy, she said. No. What do you want? He exhaled slowly. I want to understand you without owning the narrative. She leaned back slightly, evaluating the sincerity behind the words. You're not used to not leading, she observed. No. And you're not used to being told no, no. And tonight, I told you no, yes. A faint trace of something almost like a smile touched her lips. And you stayed anyway. Yes. Why? He answered without deflection. Because walking away would have been easier. And I'm starting to question whether easy aligns with right. The transformation was subtle. No grand declarations, no sweeping gestures, just tone shifting from authority to inquiry. You realize, she said gently, that I'm still evaluating you. I would expect that, and if I decide you're not aligned, then I accept it. She searched his expression for pride. Found none. You're different from the lobby version, she said. The lobby version protects reputation, and this version is trying to protect growth. Corporate growth? She asked. Personal. That word lingered. Personal. Cameron Whitmore rarely used it in public sentences. A nurse returned briefly. You can sit with him now, she said to Zariah. Zariah stood, then paused. You can come in, she told Cameron quietly. He hesitated. I don't want to intrude. You won't. Inside the room, Malachi slept peacefully. Machines beeped steadily, no longer urgent. Zariah adjusted the blanket and took the chair beside the bed. Cameron stood near the window. This is the part no one sees, she said softly. What part? The stillness after crisis, the waiting, the planning for next time. You plan for next time even when this one isn't finished? He asked. Yes. He nodded slowly. In my world, he said, we plan for contingencies through capital reserves. In mine, she replied, we plan through endurance. Silence. He stepped closer to the bed. I don't want to replace your endurance, he said quietly. I want to reinforce it. She looked up at him. That requires consistency. I know. And patience. I know. And respect when I disagree. I expect disagreement. She studied him carefully. If we continue this conversation beyond tonight, it will not be about gratitude. Agreed. It will not be about rescue. Agreed. It will be about balance. He nodded. Then let's build balance. The words were simple, but intentional. No promises of romance. No declarations of destiny. Just two adults acknowledging contrast and potential. Malachi stirred slightly. Zariah leaned over. I'm here, she whispered. Cameron watched quietly. For the first time in his life, he felt something unfamiliar settle within him. Not control, not ambition. Something steadier. Humility. The hour grew late. Cameron checked his phone briefly, then silenced it again. I'll leave so you can rest, he said softly. You don't have to, she replied. But I should. She nodded once. He moved toward the door, then paused. Zariah, yes? I meant what I said earlier. I want to learn. She held his gaze steadily. Learning requires listening. I'm listening. He left quietly. No dramatic exit. No lingering glance exaggerated for effect. Just a man walking down a hospital corridor, carrying new awareness. Inside the room, Zariah sat beside her son. She replayed his words carefully. Connection without control. Personal growth. Balance. She did not trust easily, but she recognized sincerity when it aligned with action. And tonight, his actions matched his tone. The storm outside had passed. Inside both of them, something else had begun. Not romance. Not yet. Transformation. Measured. Intentional. And built on restraint rather than spectacle. Cameron did not announce his visit. He did not send flowers ahead of time. He did not dispatch an assistant to coordinate optics. He asked one simple question the afternoon after Malachi was discharged. Would it be inappropriate if I visited your neighborhood this weekend? Zariah paused before answering. Inappropriate? She repeated. Yes. You're asking for permission? Yes. That mattered. You can come, she said carefully, But you come as yourself, not as Whitmore Capital. Understood. Saturday arrived warm and bright. Southwest Atlanta carried its usual rhythm. Front porches occupied, music drifting from open windows, children's laughter echoing between brick homes. Cameron chose not to bring the black sedan. He drove himself. No driver, no security. When he turned onto Zariah's street, the difference between his penthouse and her neighborhood became visible in practical detail. No polished marble, no private elevators, just lived-in homes shaped by history and maintenance budgets. Zariah stood on her porch when he parked. She wore jeans and a simple blouse. No hotel uniform. No professional armor. He stepped out of the car. A few neighbors noticed immediately. Luxury watches are visible even when sleeves cover them. "You made it," she said evenly. "I did." He glanced around. "This is where you grew up?" "Yes." She studied his reaction carefully. "I like it," he said. "Be honest." "I am." He did not comment on cracked sidewalks or aging fences. He noticed instead how neighbors greeted one another without hesitation. Community was not curated. It was natural. Part 2. Community reaction. It took less than 3 minutes for word to travel. Mrs. Thompson stepped onto her porch first. "Zariah," she called out casually. "You got company?" "Yes, ma'am," Zariah replied. Cameron nodded respectfully. "Afternoon," he said. Mrs. Thompson assessed him slowly from head to toe. "You from around here?" "No, ma'am." "Where you from?" "Boston originally, Atlanta by choice." She crossed her arms lightly. "And what brings Boston to our block?" Zariah answered calmly. "We're having a conversation." Mrs. Thompson raised one eyebrow. "Conversation better be respectful." "It is," Cameron said firmly. A group of teenagers gathered near the corner, whispering. "That's him," one of them murmured. "That's the billionaire from the news." Cameron heard it. He did not react defensively. Zariah leaned slightly closer to him. "You're visible here," she said quietly. "I expected that. Visibility isn't always comfort. I'm learning that." Aunt Denise emerged from the side yard carrying a bowl covered in foil. She stopped when she saw Cameron. "So, this is the one," she said bluntly. "Yes, ma'am," Cameron replied, before Zariah could intervene. Aunt Denise tilted her head. "You comfortable?" "No," he admitted. A brief silence followed. Honesty disarmed tension faster than arrogance ever could. The differences were not subtle. Cameron's upbringing valued privacy. Southwest Atlanta valued proximity. In Boston, neighbors waved politely from a distance. Here, neighbors asked direct questions without apology. "Y'all serious?" Someone called from across the street. "We're talking," Zariah responded calmly. Cameron noticed children running freely between yards. He noticed folding chairs arranged in clusters. He noticed laughter that did not require invitation. "This is loud," he said quietly to Zariah. "This is alive," she corrected gently. He nodded. At one point, music started from a parked car. Old school R&B filled the air. Cameron instinctively checked his watch. She noticed. "You on a schedule?" "No." "Then let it breathe." He placed his hands in his pockets and allowed himself to observe without analysis. No quarterly projections, no performance metrics, just life unfolding organically. A boy dribbled a basketball toward them. "You famous?" The boy asked Cameron directly. "I run a company," Cameron replied evenly. "That don't answer the question," the boy said. Zariah laughed softly. "He's learning," she said. The boy shrugged and ran off. Cameron leaned closer to her. "They don't filter. They don't have to." That simplicity unsettled him in a productive way. 2 teenage girls began turning a double Dutch rope in the middle of the street. The rope slapped rhythmically against pavement. "You jumping or watching?" One of the girls called out to Zariah. "Watching today," Zariah replied. They looked at Cameron. "You jumping?" He blinked. "I don't know how." The girls laughed lightly. "Everybody know how." "No," he said honestly. "I don't." The rope slowed. "Come on," Zariah said quietly. "You wanted proximity." He removed his jacket. Neighbors gathered subtly. The rope swung again. "Jump when we say now," one girl instructed. He tried. Missed. Laughter erupted. Not mocking. Playful. He tried again. Missed again. Sweat gathered at his temple. He looked at Zaraya. She was smiling, not at his failure, at his effort. Again she encouraged. This time he timed it correctly. 2 jumps. 3. Then the rope caught his ankle, and he stumbled back. Applause rose from nearby porches. He laughed quietly. An unfamiliar sound. Uncalculated. "I'm out of practice," he admitted. "You never practiced," Zaraya corrected gently. He nodded. That too. The moment carried weight beyond rope and pavement. Control had loosened. He allowed himself to look imperfect publicly. And the community responded with inclusion rather than rejection. By late afternoon, the smell of grilled food drifted through the block. A small cookout formed naturally, as they often did on weekends. Aunt Denise handed Cameron a paper plate. "You eat what we eat," she said. "Yes, ma'am." He accepted the plate without hesitation. No dietary restrictions announced. No performance politeness. He stood near the grill, where Mr. Lawson, an older neighbor with weathered hands, flipped burgers deliberately. "You ever cooked over charcoal, Mr.?" Lawson asked. "Yes," Cameron replied. "But not recently." "Charcoal don't rush," Mr. Lawson said. "You gotta wait for heat to settle right." Cameron recognized the parallel. "You don't rush flavor," Zaraya's mother used to say. Different cities. Same wisdom. Children ran between adults carrying juice boxes. Malachi, now steady and energetic, approached Cameron. "You bad at jumping rope," he said honestly. "Yes," Cameron agreed. Malachi grinned. "I can teach you." "I'd appreciate that." Zaraya watched the exchange carefully. No forced affection. No staged bonding. Just presence. At one point, Aunt Denise leaned toward Zaraya quietly. "He ain't running," she observed. "No," Zaraya replied. "That's something." "Yes." Zaraya felt her guard shift slightly. Not disappear. Shift. As dusk approached, Mr. Lawson set down his grill tools and faced Cameron directly. "Let's talk." Cameron nodded. "You wealthy," Mr. Lawson began plainly. "Yes." "You used to controlling outcomes." "Yes." "You understand what it costs to date a woman from here?" Cameron did not rush his answer. "I'm learning." Mr. Lawson stepped closer. "Learning ain't enough if you quit when uncomfortable." "I don't intend to quit," Cameron replied evenly. "Intentions don't matter without endurance." Cameron held his gaze. "I understand." Mr. Lawson studied him for a long moment. "Why her?" Cameron answered, without rehearsed phrasing. "Because she moves with strength that isn't loud. Because she challenged my decisions without fear. Because she doesn't bend for access." Mr. Lawson nodded slowly. "You think money impresses us?" "No. What you think impresses us?" "Consistency," Cameron said. Silence settled. Mr. Lawson crossed his arms. "You ready to be uncomfortable long term?" Cameron did not hesitate. "Yes." Mr. Lawson shook his head slightly. "Wrong answer." Cameron blinked. "Why?" "Comfort ain't the goal. Growth is." Cameron absorbed that. Mr. Lawson stepped back. "You ain't here to save nobody." "No," Cameron agreed. "You here to learn?" "Yes." Mr. Lawson waited. Cameron took a breath. "I'm trying to learn how." The words were simple. Unpolished. Honest. Mr. Lawson nodded once. "Then keep showing up." As the sun dipped lower, neighbors began dispersing gradually. Music softened. Children called inside for dinner. Cameron stood beside Zaraya near the porch steps. "You survived," she said quietly. "I was evaluated thoroughly," he replied. "You were?" He glanced around the street again. "This place holds you," he observed. "Yes. I understand better now." "What do you understand?" "That resilience isn't individual here. It's collective." She nodded slowly. And I don't want to disrupt that." She studied him carefully. "You didn't try to dominate," she said. "I wouldn't dare. You didn't correct anyone." "I had nothing to correct." "You didn't perform." "I don't know how to perform here." That honesty softened something inside her. "You don't fit," she said gently. "I know. And yet you stayed." "Yes." "Why?" He looked directly at her. "Because proximity matters. Because respect requires presence, and because if I'm serious about learning, I can't do it from a penthouse. Her guard lowered another degree. You'll still go back to that penthouse tonight, she said. Yes, and I'll still take the bus Monday morning. Yes. Does that imbalance bother you? It does. Why? Because I'm realizing access should not determine safety. She considered that deeply. You're changing, she said quietly. I'm trying. The streetlight flickered on above them. Malachi tugged at Zariah's hand. Mommy, can he come again? She looked down at her son, then back at Cameron. That depends, she said softly. On what? Cameron asked. On consistency. He nodded once. I can do consistency. She did not promise anything. She did not declare anything. But for the first time since the storm, she allowed something new. Possibility. Two worlds had collided. Not through spectacle, through presence. Cameron drove away that night with charcoal scent lingering faintly on his clothes. Zariah stood on her porch watching until his car disappeared around the corner. The bridge between Boston Legacy and Southwest Atlanta Resilience had not fully formed, but the foundation had been laid, and for the first time both of them were willing to cross it. A week after the cookout, Cameron invited Zariah to his penthouse. He did not frame it as spectacle. I want you to see where I live, he had said simply, not to impress you. To be transparent, she accepted after careful thought. Malachi was with Aunt Denise for the evening. Zariah dressed simply, deliberately avoiding anything that felt performative. She entered the high-rise lobby without intimidation, though she noticed the quiet shift in security staff posture when Cameron greeted her personally. The elevator ride to the 48th floor was silent but not strained. When the doors opened, Atlanta's skyline greeted them through floor-to-ceiling windows. City lights stretched endlessly, highways glowing like veins beneath the night. Zariah stepped onto the balcony slowly. Wind brushed against her hair. The city felt close enough to touch from that height. It's beautiful, she said honestly. It is, he agreed. She leaned lightly against the railing. Do you feel powerful up here? She asked. He considered the question. I used to, he replied. Now I mostly feel isolated. She turned toward him. That's new. Yes. Because of me? She asked carefully. Because I'm starting to measure success differently. The air between them carried softness not rooted in weakness, but in awareness. You see the whole city from here, she said quietly. Yet sometimes I feel disconnected from it. She nodded. Distance can distort perspective. He looked at her. That's why I needed to stand on your block. And that's why I needed to stand here, she replied. Two worlds. Same sky. Different vantage points. The balcony became symbolic, neither superior nor inferior. Just context. Later that evening, Cameron insisted on cooking dinner himself. Are you sure? Zariah asked with mild skepticism. I'm capable, he replied with a faint smile. The kitchen was sleek and immaculate. Stainless steel counters reflected warm light. He prepared salmon and vegetables confidently, perhaps too confidently. She watched quietly as he sprinkled salt sparingly over the pan. That's it? She asked. Yes, he said. You scared of seasoning? He raised an eyebrow. I believe in balance. She laughed softly. You believe in minimalism. He handed her the spice cabinet. Then educate me. She stepped closer, selecting paprika and garlic powder without hesitation. Flavor isn't aggressive, she said. It's expressive. He watched her hands move with familiarity. She seasoned generously but thoughtfully. There, she said. Now it tastes like intention. He smiled. So Boston underseasons? You tell me, she teased. They tasted the finished meal together at the counter. He nodded slowly. I stand corrected. She laughed again, and this time it lingered longer. It was not the laughter of polite conversation. It was shared joy. For Cameron, the sound felt grounding. In boardrooms, laughter usually masked tension or secured alliances. Here, it existed without agenda. You're not as rigid as I assumed, she admitted. And you're not as guarded as I expected, he replied gently. I'm still guarded. I know. The humor softened edges that had formed through caution. They returned to the balcony after dinner. The city below pulsed steadily. Silence settled between them, but it was full rather than empty. "You've been consistent," she said quietly. "I said I would be." "You don't miss meetings to sit in waiting rooms," she continued. "I reschedule," he corrected. She glanced at him. "You've been present. I'm trying." A breeze passed through. Her hand rested lightly on the railing. Without calculating, without rehearsing, his fingers brushed against hers. A pause. She did not pull away. He did not advance further. Their fingers intertwined naturally. No dramatic shift. Just contact. The warmth was subtle, steady. "This feels different," she said softly. "Different how?" he asked. "Unrushed." He nodded. "I don't want to move faster than trust." Her eyes met his. "And if trust takes time, then time is what we use." Their hands remained linked. There was no urgency in the gesture, only acknowledgement. He felt something new, not possession, not conquest. Partnership forming quietly. She studied their intertwined fingers. "You're not gripping," she observed. "I don't want to." The tension that once existed between pride and power was easing. Not dissolving, easing. The wind picked up slightly. "You're cold," he said. "I'm fine." "You're always fine." She hesitated. "Not always." He stepped closer. Slowly, deliberately. He lifted his free hand and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. She did not retreat. Instead, she tilted her chin slightly upward. In that quiet space above Atlanta's lights, Cameron leaned forward and rested his forehead gently against hers. No rush, no pressure, just closeness. Her eyes closed briefly. His did too. The moment contained neither desperation nor performance. It contained understanding. "You're strong," he whispered softly. "So are you," she replied. "I'm still learning that strength doesn't have to be silent. And I'm learning that help doesn't always mean dependence." He exhaled quietly. "I don't want to rescue you." She opened her eyes. "Good. I want to walk beside you." "That's different." "Yes." Her hand tightened slightly in his. "That I can consider." The emotional midpoint had arrived. No declarations of love. No promises of forever. Just alignment deepening. They returned inside, sitting on the edge of the sofa facing one another. "You've disrupted my certainty," Cameron admitted. "In what way?" "I believed achievement created fulfillment. Now I'm seeing it requires connection." She nodded. "I believed independence meant doing everything alone," she said. "Now I'm realizing partnership isn't weakness." He studied her carefully. "You don't owe me vulnerability," he said. "And you don't owe me transformation. But I want both," he added. She smiled softly. "You always move strategically. And this feels intentional, not strategic." He accepted that distinction. "What would scare you most?" she asked him gently. "Losing control," he answered honestly. "And what would scare you?" he continued. "Losing autonomy." They sat with that mutual truth. "If we ever threaten those things," she said quietly, "we reassess." Agreed. Malachi's photo rested framed on a nearby shelf where Cameron had placed it earlier when she visited with him in the daytime. "He matters most," Cameron said. "He does. And I won't compete with that." "You shouldn't." She reached for his hand again. "You've met my world," she said. "And you've stepped into mine," he replied. "I don't fit here. You don't have to." "You don't fit on my block," she countered gently. "But I'm learning." She held his gaze steadily. "That matters." Outside, city lights shimmered. Inside, two different upbringings found rhythm. No fireworks, no spectacle, just steady warmth building like low heat under charcoal. This was not infatuation. It was deliberate affection forming through respect. Cameron leaned forward once more and pressed a soft kiss against her forehead. "Nothing more." "Enough. I'm glad you walked into that wrong car," he said quietly. She laughed faintly. "Next time I'll check the license plate." "Please do," he replied. They both smiled. The emotional midpoint had shifted the foundation of their connection, not because of dramatic confession, because restraint created depth, two disciplined hearts learning new language. And this time, neither control nor pride stood in opposition. They stood side by side. The shift began quietly. Cameron noticed it first during a quarterly strategy luncheon at an exclusive Midtown club. Conversations paused slightly when he entered, not out of disrespect, out of curiosity sharpened by rumor. Two executives stood near the bar, voices lowered but not low enough. "Have you seen him lately?" one asked. "With her?" the other replied. Cameron did not turn immediately. He continued forward, greeting stakeholders with measured calm. But the atmosphere had changed. Later, during a private discussion about expansion portfolios, one board member cleared his throat. "There's chatter," he said carefully. "About?" Cameron asked evenly. "Your personal affiliations." Cameron leaned back in his chair. "My personal life does not interfere with quarterly performance. Perception affects markets," the board member responded. Another executive added, "You've been seen in Southwest Atlanta frequently." "Yes," Cameron replied. "With a hotel employee." The room went still. Cameron's voice remained controlled. "She is not a subordinate in my company. She works at a property within our investment portfolio." "Indirectly," Cameron corrected. "It still creates narrative risk," someone interjected. Whispering had turned into formal caution. Cameron understood elite circles well. They valued control over unpredictability. Relationships that crossed socioeconomic lines created speculation. "What exactly concerns you?" he asked calmly. "Optics," one investor answered. "Brand stability." Cameron folded his hands deliberately. Brand stability is built on ethical leadership, not personal conformity. Silence followed. But he could feel it, judgment disguised as professionalism. 2 days later, his communications director requested a meeting. "We need to discuss contingency messaging," she said gently. "For what?" "In case photos surface." "Photos of what?" "You and Zariah." He did not flinch. "We've done nothing inappropriate. That's not the issue," she replied carefully. "Narratives don't require wrongdoing. They require attention." He walked toward the window in his office. "What's the concern?" "The perception of power imbalance." He absorbed that. "I've never leveraged influence over her employment." "I believe you," she said. "But headlines won't contextualize nuance." He exhaled slowly. "So, what do you suggest?" "Preemptive statement if necessary. Clarify independence. Emphasize transparency." Cameron nodded once. "Prepare it," he said, "but do not release unless required." She hesitated. "You understand this could affect investor confidence." "I understand," he replied. But beneath that calm exterior, tension tightened. He had faced hostile takeovers without anxiety, yet this felt different. This involved more than valuation. It involved vulnerability. At the next board meeting, the issue surfaced again. "This is not personal judgment," the board chair said carefully. "It's fiduciary responsibility." Cameron remained composed. "Is there evidence of compromised decision-making?" he asked. "No." "Have quarterly metrics declined?" "No." "Has employee retention improved since restructuring?" "Yes." "Then what exactly are we debating?" One member spoke plainly. "Your judgment." The word lingered. Cameron felt it, not as accusation, as doubt. "I am not apologizing for building relationships outside curated circles," he said evenly. "That's not the expectation." "Then state the expectation clearly." The room quieted. "We expect discretion." Cameron's jaw tightened slightly. "I have been discreet." "Discretion does not prevent scrutiny," someone added. He realized then that success insulated him only until deviation occurred. And deviation, in their eyes, was proximity to a woman from a background they did not understand. He left the meeting steady. But inside, something unsettled. On the other side of the city, Southwest Atlanta processed differently. Aunt Denise wasted no time. "I see the cars," she said bluntly. "I see the building you went to." Zariah remained calm. And I don't want you dazzled. I'm not. Money can look like safety," her aunt warned. "But it can also look like control." Zariah folded laundry slowly. "He's not controlling. Yet." Zariah paused. "He asks more than he tells." "That's good," Aunt Denise replied. "But remember who you were before him." "I do." Mrs. Thompson added her own perspective later that week. "Men with access are used to doors opening," she said gently. Make sure he doesn't expect yours to open automatically. Zariah absorbed every word, not defensively, carefully. She trusted her instincts, but community protection carried weight. That night, Zariah sat alone at her kitchen table reviewing a hospital payment plan update. Numbers were manageable, barely. She stared at the total. Cameron could eliminate it in seconds. The thought unsettled her. She did not want relief purchased through dependency. She replayed his words from the balcony. I don't want to rescue you. She believed him. Yet fear lingered. What if affection slowly blurred into reliance? What if she stopped calculating grocery totals because she assumed backup existed? She did not want her discipline softened by comfort. Malachi's voice echoed from his bedroom. Mommy, yes? You okay? Yes, she replied gently. And she meant it. But independence had become identity. Losing it felt like losing structure. Across town, Cameron sat in his penthouse, reviewing investor emails questioning his judgment. He placed his tablet down and leaned back. He was accustomed to scrutiny over deals, not over affection. He feared something unfamiliar, not scandal. Exposure. Zariah saw parts of him board members never would. She had witnessed uncertainty in his tone. Had heard him admit, I don't know how. That vulnerability felt powerful and dangerous. He feared losing control over narrative. He feared emotional miscalculation. He feared that if this relationship collapsed publicly, it would confirm elite doubts about his judgment. But deeper than that, he feared losing her respect. For a man trained to measure risk, this felt immeasurable. The headline appeared on a Wednesday morning. Whitmore CEO dating employee within investment portfolio. A blurred photo accompanied it. Cameron leaving the Crescent Royale lobby with Zariah beside him. The article speculated about influence, favoritism, and internal ethics reviews. It framed proximity as advantage. Zariah saw it first. A coworker approached her cautiously. Is this about you? She read the headline once. Then again. Her chest tightened, not from shame, from intrusion. Cameron's phone exploded with notifications. Board members requesting immediate clarification. PR advisors urging statement release. He called her immediately. I'm sorry, he said. For what? She asked calmly. For this becoming public without your consent. She sat down slowly. I didn't sign up for headlines. I know. Did you leak it? She asked directly. No. I believe you. That trust steadied him. They're questioning governance, he said. They're questioning you, she corrected. And by extension, you. Silence. The stakes had shifted. No longer private tension. Public narrative. By afternoon, Cameron held a press call. He spoke clearly. My relationship is personal. It does not influence corporate policy. We maintain ethical boundaries and transparent governance. He refused to diminish Zariah to protect optics. He refused to deny connection for investor comfort. Meanwhile, at the hotel, whispers circled. Did she leverage him? Someone asked quietly. Zariah faced her supervisor directly. My performance record stands on its own, she said evenly. It does, the manager replied. But corporate will review. I expect that. She would not appear defensive. She would not appear grateful. She would appear steady. That evening, Cameron arrived at her apartment, not in the black sedan. Alone. You okay? He asked softly. I will be, she replied. He stepped inside. I won't let them frame you as opportunistic, he said firmly. You don't control framing, she replied. But I control integrity. She looked at him carefully. Do you regret this? No. Even with scrutiny? Yes. Even if investors withdraw? Yes. Her breath steadied. You're certain? I've built wealth, he said quietly. I won't sacrifice truth to preserve it. That sentence landed deeply. For the first time since the article surfaced, her fear eased. He was not retreating. He was standing. Outside pressure intensified. Inside alignment strengthened. If you have ever been judged for who you love, if you have ever had your character questioned because of proximity, if you have ever chosen connection despite criticism, hit like, because sometimes the world tests your relationship not with failure, but with scrutiny. The article changed the stakes. No longer quiet affection, now public examination. But neither pride nor power stepped back, and that decision would define everything that followed. The headlines continued for 3 days. Commentary panels speculated. Blogs framed narrative. Opinion threads debated power imbalance without context. Cameron could have responded the way powerful men often do. He could have purchased a home in Zariah's name and called it security. He could have paid off her hospital balances publicly and labeled it generosity. He could have announced scholarships in her honor and positioned himself as benevolent. Each option would have shifted narrative quickly. Each option would have diminished her autonomy quietly. He chose none of them. Instead, he requested an emergency executive session, not to address romance, but to address policy. Board members arrived expecting damage control. They received structural change. I am proposing a comprehensive expansion of employee healthcare benefits across all Whitmore Capital divisions, Cameron began calmly. Murmurs spread. This includes full coverage for dependent pediatric respiratory treatment, reduced claim delay protocols, and emergency authorization override within 2 hours. The CFO leaned forward. This is a substantial cost increase. Yes, Cameron replied. It is also a competitive advantage. One board member narrowed his eyes. This is about the article. No, Cameron said firmly. This is about responsibility. He projected data onto the screen. Turnover costs reduced through improved benefits. Retention projections increased. Public brand trust strengthened through policy transparency. Employees are infrastructure, he continued. If we expect loyalty in crisis, we must provide stability in routine. The room quieted. This was not reactive charity. It was systemic correction. And this applies company-wide? Someone asked. Yes. No exceptions? No exceptions. He did not mention Zariah's name. He did not center personal narrative. He protected her by refusing to isolate her. Later that afternoon, Cameron arrived at Southwest Atlanta again. No cameras. No press statement. Zariah sat on her porch reviewing Malachi's school calendar. He approached slowly. I made a decision today, he said. She looked up. What kind of decision? Policy. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Explain. He sat beside her. I expanded healthcare coverage for every employee across our portfolio. No delays, no pediatric exceptions, immediate authorization protocols. She studied his face carefully. For everyone? She asked. Yes. Not just the hotel? No. Not just transportation? No. She absorbed that. You didn't announce it with my name attached, she said. No. You didn't say it was inspired by me. No. Silence lingered. You didn't buy anything for me, she added. No. Why? He answered plainly. Because your dignity matters more than optics, and because systemic change outlives gifts. She felt something shift deeply. You could have solved my bills overnight, she said quietly. Yes. And you didn't? No. Why? Because you didn't ask me to. Her eyes softened. And because I don't want to own your story, he continued. I want to honor it. The words settled. Not dramatic. True. The following morning, Cameron declined 3 national interview requests. One anchor had framed the situation as a corporate redemption romance. Another outlet suggested he was attempting to rehabilitate his image through compassion. His communications director asked carefully, Are we releasing a personal statement? No, Cameron replied. What's the strategy? Consistency. He authorized one concise press release. Whitmore Capital announces expanded healthcare benefits effective immediately across all divisions. Commitment to employee well-being remains central to operational excellence. No mention of relationship. No personal commentary. At the hotel, Zariah's co-workers read the announcement quietly. They changed coverage? One asked. Company-wide, another replied. Zariah remained composed. Her supervisor approached her privately. This wasn't done for you, he said gently. I know, she answered. And she did. Because if it had been done for her, it would have felt heavy. Instead, it felt equitable. Later that evening, she called Cameron. You refused the interviews, she said. Yes. Why? Because your life isn't content. She closed her eyes briefly. Thankful. That night, Zariah stood in her small living room, holding the updated benefits packet her manager had distributed. Emergency pediatric respiratory authorization guaranteed within 2 hours. Dependent coverage increased. Claim processing oversight established. She thought about the hospital receptionist mentioning delays. She thought about the anxiety in the waiting room. She thought about the grocery math she practiced weekly. Cameron could have relieved her alone. Instead, he relieved thousands. Her phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Denise. "Girl, I saw that announcement." "Yes, ma'am." "He didn't single you out." "No, that's rare." "Yes." A pause. "You sure he ain't trying to impress?" Zariah smiled softly. "No. He's trying to correct." That distinction changed everything. He had not attempted to elevate her above others. He had leveled the field beneath her. She replayed their balcony conversation. "I don't want to rescue you." He meant it. He was never trying to own her narrative. He was trying to align with it. Back in the boardroom, reactions were mixed. "This is expensive," one investor stated bluntly. "It is," Cameron agreed. "But morale metrics improved immediately," the COO added. "Early feedback is overwhelmingly positive." Another executive leaned back thoughtfully. "Public sentiment shifted," he observed. "Not because of the article, because of the policy." Cameron nodded slightly. "Long-term loyalty produces long-term profit," he said. The board chair studied him carefully. "You've changed," he remarked. "I've matured," Cameron replied calmly. There was no apology in his tone, no defensiveness, just conviction. For the first time since the article surfaced, investor calls shifted from questioning his judgment to evaluating his foresight. Outside pressure had attempted to destabilize. He responded with structure. That weekend, Cameron joined Zariah and Malachi at a local park. No headlines followed. Children ran between swings and slides. Malachi tugged Cameron toward the basketball court. "You still bad at jumping rope," Malachi teased. "I'm improving," Cameron replied with a grin. Zariah watched them interact naturally. No performance, no grand gestures, just presence. When Cameron returned to sit beside her on the bench, she spoke quietly. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Of what?" "That you would fix everything publicly and make me look dependent. I wouldn't do that. I know now." He looked at her carefully. "What changed?" "You didn't center me," she said. "You centered principle." He absorbed that. "You deserve partnership," he replied, "not patronage." Her guard lowered completely in that moment, not because of money, because of restraint. She reached for his hand. "I misjudged one thing," she said softly. "What?" "I thought powerful men only protect image. And you protected integrity." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Integrity protects image long term," he said quietly. She laughed faintly. "Still strategic. Still learning." That evening, as sunset painted the sky over southwest Atlanta, they stood outside her home. "You understand what this means," she said. "Tell me." "It means you chose difficulty." "Yes." "It means you risked reputation." "Yes." "It means you prioritized equity over ego." "Yes." "And you didn't ask me to thank you." "No." She stepped closer. "I won't lose myself in this. I don't want you to. I won't depend on you financially. I don't expect you to. I will walk beside you. That's all I want." The emotional center shifted fully. No longer tension between pride and power. Now alignment between autonomy and influence. Malachi ran onto the porch calling for dinner. Zariah smiled. "I need to cook." "Season generously," Cameron replied lightly. She laughed. "Boston minimalism is banned." He grinned. Understood. As he walked back toward his car, he felt something solidify inside him. He had not purchased affection. He had not silenced criticism through spectacle. He had built structure where gaps once existed, and in doing so, he proved something to himself as much as to her. Love does not require ownership. It requires honor. The article faded from trending pages within days, but the policy remained. Employees across divisions experienced immediate benefit. Retention numbers climbed. Internal morale strengthened. And in southwest Atlanta, a woman who once feared losing independence realized something powerful. He was never trying to write her story. He was trying to respect it. That realization changed everything. 6 months changed the rhythm of everything. Not dramatically, not magically, steadily. Whitmore Capital's expanded healthcare policy had been fully implemented across all divisions. Employee retention rose. Public scrutiny faded into archived headlines. Cameron's board no longer questioned his judgment. They referenced his long-term foresight instead. In southwest Atlanta, routine remained grounded. Zariah still calculated groceries, still rode the bus when practical, still worked at the Crescent Royale, now promoted to guest experience supervisor after a performance review based entirely on merit. Nothing in her life had been purchased away. Everything had been strengthened. Cameron still lived in his penthouse, still led investor calls, still negotiated expansion contracts. But now, some evenings ended not in silence, but in conversation. There was no fairy tale relocation, no rushed cohabitation, just earned consistency. And on this particular Saturday afternoon, Southwest Atlanta was alive again. Because it was Malachi's birthday. The backyard behind Zariah's home had been transformed with simple intention. Foldable tables lined with bright tablecloths. Plastic cups filled with lemonade. A bounce house humming near the fence. Streamers tied carefully along the porch railing. Church music played softly from a portable speaker. Classic gospel harmonies blending with children's laughter. Aunt Denise moved between guests, directing traffic like a seasoned event coordinator. "Don't put the cake near the grill," she warned. "And somebody find extra napkins." Kids ran barefoot through grass. Neighbors gathered easily. It was not extravagant. It was full. Cameron stood near the grill wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. No blazer, no cufflinks. He looked slightly nervous. Mr. Lawson handed him a pair of tongs. "You burn it, you eat it," Mr. Lawson said firmly. "Yes, sir," Cameron replied with a faint smile. The charcoal popped beneath the grate. He adjusted the burgers carefully. Zariah watched from the porch steps, arms loosely folded. 6 months ago, this sight would have startled her. Now it felt earned. Malachi darted across the yard with a group of friends. "Mommy," he shouted. "He can't flip them right." "I can hear you," Cameron called back playfully. The children laughed. "Flip it faster," one boy yelled. Cameron glanced toward Mr. Lawson for guidance. "Patience," Mr. Lawson instructed calmly. "Let it cook." Cameron nodded and adjusted the heat slightly. Across the yard, Mrs. Thompson leaned toward Aunt Denise. "He's still here," she observed. "Yes, he is," Aunt Denise replied. "And not looking for applause." "Nope." Zariah caught pieces of their conversation. Her chest warmed quietly. Cameron did not hover possessively, did not perform affection for neighbors, did not overstep. He blended, earned, present. The music shifted to a familiar gospel chorus. Children clapped rhythmically. The air carried charcoal smoke and frosting sweetness, and Zariah felt something unfamiliar settle inside her. Peace without tension. Cameron wiped his hands on a towel and leaned toward Mr. Lawson. "Is this right?" he asked quietly. Mr. Lawson inspected the burgers. "You learning?" he said. "Trying to... Still uncomfortable?" "Yes." "Good." Cameron smiled. He had grown comfortable with discomfort. Boardrooms no longer rattled him, but community expectations still mattered deeply. He wanted this not to feel temporary, not to feel like an experiment. As he plated the burgers, Malachi ran up beside him. "Can I help?" the boy asked. "You can carry this tray," Cameron replied carefully. Malachi held the plate with exaggerated seriousness. "Don't drop it," Cameron warned gently. "I won't." The small teamwork felt natural, not staged. Zariah watched that exchange closely. She had promised herself one thing months ago. If Cameron ever treated her son as an accessory, she would walk away. But he never did. He treated Malachi as priority. As dusk approached, the cake was placed at the center of the main table. Candles flickered. Neighbors gathered around singing softly. Malachi closed his eyes before blowing them out. Cheers erupted when smoke curled upward. Later, as gifts were opened and children returned to the bounce house, Malachi wandered toward Cameron again. The boy looked up at him seriously. "You staying?" Malachi asked. The question carried more weight than a child intended. Cameron crouched slightly to meet his eye level. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. "Like, staying. Zariah froze mid-step near the porch. Conversations around them softened slightly. Cameron did not rush the answer. He looked toward Zariah briefly. She held his gaze steadily. No prompting, no fear, just openness. Cameron turned back to Malachi. "I'm not going anywhere," he said calmly. Not loudly, not theatrically, just firm. Malachi nodded once. "Okay," he replied simply, and ran back toward his friends. Zariah exhaled slowly, not because she doubted him, because hearing it aloud shifted something permanent. As the evening cooled, Malachi tripped lightly near the edge of the yard. "My shoe's loose," he complained. Before Zariah could move, Cameron stepped forward. "Come here," he said gently. He knelt in the grass without hesitation, carefully tightened the laces, tied the knot securely, double-checked the loops. Malachi watched attentively. "Like this," Cameron explained quietly. "Cross, pull, loop, tuck." Malachi mimicked the motion with small fingers. Zariah stood a few feet away, watching. Something inside her shifted fully in that moment. Not infatuation, not relief, recognition. He was not stepping in to replace. He was stepping in to reinforce. The difference mattered. When Cameron stood back up, their eyes met across the yard. No words needed. She saw consistency. He saw trust. As twilight settled, guests began gathering plates and folding chairs. Music lowered. Children grew tired. Cameron walked toward Zariah quietly. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, you look thoughtful." "I am." He waited. "You didn't hesitate," she said softly. "With what?" Answering him. "I meant it." "I know." She stepped closer. "This doesn't feel rushed," she continued. "It doesn't feel fragile. That's intentional. No fairy-tale pressure. No. Just steady. Yes." Her expression softened fully. For months she had measured everything carefully. His presence, his tone, his follow-through. Tonight confirmed what time had been proving. Respect came before rescue. Strength did not cancel softness. Wealth meant nothing without compassion. Partnership outweighed possession, and real love protected publicly and privately. Not with grand speeches, with consistent action. The yard quieted gradually. Aunt Denise hugged Zariah tightly. "You look calm," she whispered. "I am." Mrs. Thompson waved from her porch. "Good man," she called out. Zariah smiled softly. Cameron stood nearby, stacking chairs with Mr. Lawson. No need for announcement. No need for validation. Just presence. As the last guests left, Cameron approached Zariah again. "You did good," he said gently. "We did," she corrected. He nodded. "Yes, we did." Malachi yawned dramatically. "Bedtime," Zariah said. Cameron knelt one last time. "Happy birthday, champ." "Thanks," Malachi replied sleepily. When the house door closed behind them, Cameron lingered briefly on the porch. He did not push for invitation. He did not assume permanence. Zariah stepped back outside quietly. "You don't have to leave yet," she said. He smiled. "I'll stay." And he did, not because he needed to prove anything, but because earned peace felt better than dramatic romance ever could. Through storms and scrutiny, one truth stood firm: respect must come before rescue. Strength does not cancel softness. Wealth without compassion holds no meaning. Partnership outweighs possession, and real love protects both publicly and privately, not through spectacle, through steadiness. If this story moved you, comment "Stand beside me." Like this video so YouTube knows stories like this matter. Subscribe to Mr. Heartstring Tales, where love meets life lessons.